Inside Politics today, our guest is Scripps National Political Correspondent Joe St. George. Scripps is the parent company for News Channel 5. Joe, there's also been talk from the Republicans that they'd like to impeach President Biden. How are they going to make that look credible? Is that going to be you impeach my guy, I impeach your guy when he's in office?
Well, a lot of it, there's certainly plenty of conservatives who would like to see some revenge for the impeachment votes conducted by Democrats during the Trump years. They would like some revenge for this January 6th hearing. This is going to be one of the many difficult tasks ahead of Representative Kevin McCarthy, assuming that he is Speaker next year if Republicans do in fact take back the House of Representatives. I think it will depend on his majority, and what does that look like? What is clear in the polls, Pat, is this isn't going to be a red wave tsunami of an election that some predicted it might be back in June and July. Yes, Republicans could still very well take back the House and the Senate, but when you start looking at the polling and a lot of these individual races, it's hard to see a 60-seat majority, a 50-seat majority for Republicans. It may be quite small, very similar to the majority that Speaker Nancy Pelosi has now.
So you say it's not going to be a tsunami for the Republicans. Are the Democrats, they do still have a chance to take the Senate, you think, at this point? That's been the other speculation, at least in recent weeks.
Absolutely they do. And one of the big reasons, if you start looking at all of these races, it's coin flips in a lot of places. But that being said, it's not so much the issues that have set Republicans back this summer into the fall. It's probably the candidates. And I'm talking about two states in particular. One is Georgia, where you have a major political scandal involving Herschel Walker. And the question is, is that enough for Democrats to keep that seat? And then I also think you have a candidate issue unfolding in Pennsylvania. Dr. Oz hasn't said anything to disqualify him or turn off voters. It's just the fact that there is this belief, certainly in Philly suburbs, if you travel there, and I get a chance to travel to a lot of parts of the country, there's this sense that Dr. Oz is actually from New Jersey, he's not one of us. So I think Democrats have a chance. So Republicans, though, are certainly no doubt favored.
Republicans for years had advocated for the repeal of the Roe versus Wade decision by the Supreme Court. That happened this summer, but the new ruling in the Dobbs case seems to have put the GOP in a lot of cases back on the defensive. Did they underestimate the backlash from women about this decision and just the complications of a new post-Roe world?
I don't think they underestimated it. I think that, though, it hasn't risen to be the top issue in this campaign. I was in East Las Vegas last week. Nevada is another one of those important states that viewers who care about politics in Tennessee need to pay attention to on election night. Nevada may decide this whole Senate race, really, because it's a race it's a seat currently held by a Democrat, Senator Cortez Masto. There's a real good chance Republicans are able to flip that. But in East Las Vegas, talking with voters last week, Pat, abortion didn't come up once as their top issue. It's the economy. It's inflation out there. There's a lot of Latino voters. They care about immigration and the border. Healthcare and education are also popping, which doesn't get a lot of attention on political talk shows like this, but that's certainly on the mind of voters as well. So we shall see. I mean, no doubt that abortion is mobilizing suburban women for Democrats. It's energized their base. But this is an election, it feels like it's going to be about the economy and inflation.
In that case, that would not be good news for the Democrats. I mean, the numbers that came out just yesterday in the Consumer Price Index were not good news at all for President Biden or for the Federal Reserve.
And they're trying their darndest to spin it, right? To spin it to political analysts, political reporters like you or me, Pat, saying, oh, seniors' cost of living adjustments come January with Social Security are going to be higher. Look what we've done with prescription drug reform and the Inflation Reduction Act. But if people drive down the street and they're paying $4.50 for a gallon of gas after they just spent $150 at the grocery store and are looking at what exactly do we get, I mean, that's going to ultimately drive voters. And also, I think, in some of these states, abortion isn't playing as big of a role as you may think. Certainly in a state like Tennessee, that's going to mobilize Democrats, right? In a place like Georgia. But in Nevada, they have the abortion protections enshrined in the law. They haven't seen any major changes, so it's tough to mobilize your base in Nevada on an issue that isn't really impacting women there.
Republicans are also making an issue in some states of rising violent crime going on across the country. Might that decide a race like the one in Pennsylvania for the Senate?
Absolutely. You talk to people who are, if they're afraid to go to an Eagles game downtown or a Phillies playoff game downtown, that's going to have an impact. So there are certainly a lot of things that are working against Democrats. The economy and inflation, no doubt, working against them. And you also have crime working against them. But we say this how many elections, Pat? Have you and I sat at an anchor desk and said it'll come down to turnout? It's going to come down to turnout. Are voters able to churn out the black vote in Milwaukee and places like Cleveland? Then you could have a surprisingly good night for Democrats. If the Democratic base stays home, Republicans look very, very good at that point.
The accuracy of at least public polling continues to be quite a bit in question. Is that one of the reasons we're having such a hard time? Because it seems one week the polls come out this way, the next week they come out entirely differently. We just can't get a handle on polling anymore to know what's actually accurate and what's happening.
Yeah, and it's hard to trust these things. I mean, I don't know if you find yourself in this position, Pat, but I certainly find myself wondering, okay, just what is the credence of this poll? Where are the crosstabs? How many people did they interview? And also, politics changes so rapidly now, and issues change so rapidly. When was this poll conducted? There's not a lot of faith in the polling system right now. Pollsters, by the way, they know that. They try to convince political reporters every day that they're improving their methods. But at the end of the day, we just may have to get together on election night or a week after the election and really dissect what happened back.
Joe St. George is our guest. He's the national political correspondent for Scripps, the parent company for News Channel 5. Back to continue our conversation with Joe on the other side of these messages.